Hello, Giants fans, and welcome back to the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio, part of your SB Nation family of podcasts. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts across the Big Blue View Radio network. All right, as promised, we are back here with Matt Waldman of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, outstanding NFL draft analyst for the skill positions of quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver. Nobody goes into the depth on those positions that Matt does. And the other day we had a very lengthy, informative discussion about quarterbacks. I hope you guys listen to that. And if you didn't, I have to know why not. But but if you didn't, please go back and give that a listen or a watch. But anyway, Matt, thank you for hanging in there with me, and thank you for coming back. And today we're going to talk quarterback, or we're going to talk running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends.
Sounds like fun to me. Let's do it.
All right. So if you look at the Giants draft board, Giants have the 6th overall pick. There's 3 quarterbacks everybody thinks is going to go in the top 6, maybe 4 if J.J. McCarthy goes there. And then you've got the 3 wide receivers. You've got Malik Neighbors of LSU. You've got Rome Odunze of Washington. And you've got Marvin Harrison of Ohio State. In your recently released Rookie Scouting Portfolio Draft Guide, you have those 3 players ranked in an interesting order, with the media darling of that group is, of course, Marvin Harrison. He's the guy that since even before the college football season began, he was anointed as wide receiver 1, the best wide receiver prospect coming out of college football since sliced bread, or whatever you want to say. But you have him as wide receiver 3. So with that preamble, talk about Harrison, and we can talk about your rankings of those 3 guys in general.
Sure. Now, one of the things that I often like to mention at this point, because rankings are always a fascinating topic, but I write in the RSP every year why rankings suck, but we still have to deal with them. So, because really the context of a ranking in general media or as an independent draft analyst is much different than if I were a New York Giants scout, or if I were consulting specifically for one team, or I was ranking slot receivers versus flankers, or whatever. So the fact of the matter is the real deal that I always tell my folks is, don't look at the ranking, but look at the score that I gave the player. And when you look at the score I gave the player, it is one of the higher, for Marvin Harrison, it's one of the higher scores that a wide receiver has earned in the past 5 years. It's probably among the top 5 to 7 scores of receivers in that period of time. So I'm expecting him to be an instant starter, and not only an instant starter, but to have a very strong chance of being a production leader for his passing game as a rookie. So that's the real bottom line of this. But why is he number 3? Well, because I'm scouting, split ends, flankers, and slot receivers, and players who can play all 3 positions versus players who can only play some of those positions or maybe one of those positions. And I'm looking also at all the different skill sets that wide receivers are often asked to do, but not always asked to do at once. But, some teams maybe limit a receiver. Gabriel Davis, to do what he was asked to do for the Buffalo Bills, he did really well. If you asked him to do what Stephon Diggs was doing in that role, he would have failed, because that's not his job. That's not what his skill sets are. Because what he did well was be the second or third option on manufactured plays, or to outrun the defense or get open in a zone after Josh Allen bought time away from the pass rush after 2.5 seconds. Whereas and my dog agrees with that. But my dog's a strong safety in four pawed form, so I think he does not like Josh Allen. But
Your dog sounds like an inside linebacker, by the way.
yeah, he's about 60 pounds, and he basically drops like dogs twice his size. So I joke he's a Troy Polamalu, Grant Delpit kind of mix up, maybe that kind of thing. But anyway, back to the receivers is that looking at that wide range of what's being asked to do, Marvin Harrison is a terrific split end, an ex-receiver who can work the boundaries. He tracks the ball extraordinarily well over his shoulder in tight coverage. He has pretty good routes for an NFL starter right now. Some things he can tighten up at his break path so that he has sharper breaks, because those sharper breaks are going to matter in the NFL against tight man-to-man when Jalen Ramsey's covering, Jalen Ramsey type in his peak is covering you on 3rd and 15, and everyone knows you're going to get the ball and you got to win, including Jalen, knowing that. That's what Stephon Diggs would win at in his peak, because he could run routes like that. Harrison has some of those skills, but it's not completely tightened up yet. He also isn't a great runner after the catch. The way I hear people talk about him at 6'3", 209, the way they talk about him sounds like another 6'3", 212-pound prospect out of Baylor that I saw early on in his career in Cleveland by the name of Josh Gordon, who in his best year was one of the most dominant receivers we've ever seen in 1 year. Now, the things off the field obviously changed how we look at Josh Gordon. But Marvin Harrison, to me, isn't that kind of athlete. He's more of a Mike Williams plus type, a secondary receiver who can give you primary receiver production, who, if called upon to do certain things to take on the top corner, he can win on certain routes against the top corner. But if you're asking him to run timing routes against the top corner or win after the catch against a defense and earn big plays off of after the catch skills where a defense isn't wide open when he's running through in the middle of it, I would say he's not up there with the other two receivers. Those are the small differences. Okay. So if you're looking for a ball winner, a guy who's going to be able to give you some things in the screen game or clear out game and move the chains, who's going to give you some timing routes, he'll do all that very well. If you're asking him to be the top route runner and to be also a great yak player, he's not that. Whereas if you look at Rome Odunze, who's my number 2 guy, he is all that. He is he's a very skilled route runner. I think he's a little better off the line than Marvin Harrison is, who opens his chest too much. And he may have gotten away with it against the Big Ten corners, but a Jalen Ramsey type is going to have his hands in his chest because he keeps his chest open and his hands are too low. And he brings his hands down and opens his chest at the line. He's going to get jammed quicker until he works on that. There are some things he has with tells with rocking off the line of scrimmage that he's going to get jammed on. Odunze doesn't have those problems. He gets off the line very well. He's very good at setting up routes. He is excellent at the boundary as well, like Harrison, but he's even better than Harrison after the catch. He's probably the best combination of athlete and route runner of the three between Neighbors, Odunze, and Harrison. He's probably the best in that way. He's like peak form Allen Robinson in Jacksonville and maybe approaching Devontae Adams in terms of the potential he could have with the right fit and continued development. Malik Neighbors is the number 1 for me. And it's mainly because he already possesses the artistry that you need as a route runner with the footwork and hand usage to release from the line and at the top of your stem. He just toys with defenders, and he's very good at being able to handle press coverage with his skills as they are right now, and they project well for him to be able to do that at the NFL level right now. On top of that, he is tough at the catch point. He has the physical ability to win the ball in the air if you need him to, even though he's not a big guy. but he's the closest thing to Odell Beckham Jr. that I've seen since I saw Odell Beckham Jr. And he's tough at the catch point. He's very good after the catch. He's a masterful route runner. He can play all three positions if you need him to. Whereas I think with Harrison, you probably need him as an X and maybe a big slot. Was with Odunze, he could probably play all three positions if you needed him to. And I think Neighbors can do all three just at a higher level of skill at this stage.
It's interesting. You mentioned Odell Beckham in connection with Malik Neighbors, and I think I've seen that comparison before. But here's what I want to throw at you just in reference to those three guys. And I think particularly Neighbors and Odunze. I do mock drafts and they are what they are. And um, I consistently have said when it comes to the New York Giants, and you talked about, scouting or whatever for a specific team. Consistently for me, given a choice between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze for the New York Giants, I have consistently chosen Rome Odunze.
I think it's a good
And,
choice.
and I've done that for a reason. I think that when you look at what the Giants have, they have speed guys, pure speed guys in Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt. They have a slippery sort of small slot guy, gadget guy, if you want to use him that way, chain mover in Wandale Robinson. My thinking is if you believe in those guys and you don't want to replace those guys, you want to complement those guys. Rome Odunze, 6'3", 212, the big strong hands, all of the things that he does. To me, Rome Odunze is a great complement to what the Giants already have. You just am I right? Am I wrong? I don't think there's a wrong answer between those two guys, to be honest with you. I just think he fits the Giants so well.
I don't think there's a wrong answer between the three players we just talked about because of the way that they would complement the rest of the depth chart. Because if you're getting the opportunity to pick one of these guys with your first selection, then there's no guarantees that you're going to find the other fit for that X later on in the draft. As rich as this wide receiver class is, there's no guarantee Brian Thomas is going to be there, who's a good X. There's no guarantee that Keon Coleman or Brendan Rice, could be there later on in the draft as the tall boundary winners who might develop into overall good route runners. But there are probably better opportunities for you to find a potential replacement as a flanker or a slot later on in this draft class, or some combination of both, if you want to do that. And I think that way, if you took Odunze or Harrison, you're guaranteed that you filled a hole that can help you now, and then you can take your chances to see if somebody's available later that can help you replace any of the players or compete with any of the players who on your depth chart right now, if you feel like that you'd like to bolster it.
Absolutely. So just talk about, before we move off wide receiver, give me some of your favorite day 2, day 3 guys. Just want to throw a quick name at you that I'm really partial to, just because I'm curious to see what the Giants, who seem to like the yards after catch guys, they seem to like that kind of stuff. I'm really curious what Brian Daboll could do with a guy like Malachi Corley. But just give me give me some of your guys.
Sure. Jermaine Burton is probably high on that list for me, who will probably be maybe a day 2 guy. Alabama receiver out of the University of Georgia before that, 6 feet, 196 pounds. I think he's the quiet assassin of this draft. He's the guy that can play all three positions for you. He's a good route runner. He is skilled at positioning himself at the catch point on vertical and contested routes, good after the catch, does everything well. He's just not a a huge athlete. So he's more in that Robert Woods mode. You're getting, if he plays to his ability, he gives you a Robert Woods potential type of player who could, you know, do what Robert Woods did with the Rams. Play multiple roles, play it at a high level. If you need him to go deep, he will. If you need him to block, he'll play physically and do it. Need him to get some yards after the catch, he can do that. Ricky Pearsall will probably not fall too far, but if he falls to the second round, another one I really like because he's a great ball winner with great speed. He reminds me a lot of Chris Olave, to be honest, was my number one receiver in the draft 2 years ago. Very good route runner. Worked really well with Anthony Richardson off script when they needed to, or just when they needed to extend plays in the pocket. After that, now you talked about Malachi Corley, and I'll mention him. I think that, obviously as a runner, he'll remind you of DJ Moore after the catch because he's very physical. He has good vision. He's a decent pass catcher over the middle of the field, but it's about whether he can run the man-to-man routes and recognize the more complex zone coverages you'll see in the NFL that are the big questions with him. Can he win man-to-man? If he can start to show that and develop there, he'll have a chance to become a starter. Now, if you ask me, there are two players I'd take over Malachi Corley easily in the same vein of player, even though they're not as physical of runners as him. And that's Malik Washington of Virginia, who is a 5'8", 191-pound spark plug who can give you the return game, but he's tough at the catch point, a good, versatile route runner who reminds me of like maybe a Santana Moss starter kit. He's never going to be Steve Smith, but he could be a 1,000-yard receiver who could play flanker or he could play slot and occasionally match up as a split end because of his leaping ability and ball winning ability at the catch point. But after the catch, he's very efficient and runs through contact. And he's not small, he's short. He's that kind of player. Another one like that is probably going to be an undrafted free agent because not only did he have an ACL tear like a couple years ago, but he was arrested for a DWI that included charges of possession of marijuana and an unlicensed firearm. And that's Anais Smith of Texas A&M. He came into the league in the SEC as a running back, and he was a pretty good running back in terms of being able to play outside, kind of a DeAndre Swift type who wasn't great between the tackles unless you simulated open space runs between the tackles like draws, but very good outside the tackle box and in space. And Smith was that way. But they turned him into a receiver. And I'm telling you, I think he's a top 12 receiver in this class. He reminds me a lot of Golden Tate in the sense of that he's a very good pass catcher. He's tough over the middle, good route runner. You wouldn't think of him when you watch the difficulty of plays that he makes that project well to the NFL. You wouldn't think he was a former running back until after the catch. And then you start to watch him run through people, run around people, and set them up whether he's got blockers or not. And I think that if there is a guy who could give you that Curtis Samuel, Golden Tate-esque type of skill set in this class, and maybe even beyond that, do what Curtis Samuel promised to do, what Golden Tate did as a Pro Bowler where he had a peak in Detroit and early on in New York. I think Anais Smith could be that guy, provided that they've checked out what happened a couple years ago and whether he's learned from it or whether he's still an immature kid.
All right, Matt, let's move on to the running back position. And we know the situation with the Giants moving on from Saquon signing with the Eagles, Giants signing Devin Singletary to be their primary back, which is pretty predictable considering the Daboll Shane Singletary connection in Buffalo. But to me, they need to supplement that position. They drafted Eric Gray a year ago, 5th round, guy that never really got an opportunity to show, what he could do as a running back. but I would fully expect them to supplement that position, somewhere in the middle of the draft. And like I've done at a couple of other positions, I'm just going to throw a couple names at you, guys that I kind of like, guys that I think might fit that sort of multifaceted, multi-skilled role that I think the Giants might like. I'm looking at guys like Will Shipley out of Clemson and Dylan Lobe out of New Hampshire. Guys like that. I'm curious what you think of those players and maybe some of your other sort of mid-round favorites.
I really like Shipley and Lobby. They're very tight together in a grouping with a third player I'll talk about as well. Shipley to me is probably the best, um, probably the best route runner of the running backs in this class. So he can give you a little bit more dynamic ability to split them outside or in the slot and win against some defensive backs with some of the route running skills that he has. He tracks the ball well in the vertical game too. But he also holds up well enough as a runner that you could probably get some work from him between the tackles each game. You're not going to want to overload him and tire him out. That's going to be the fear. But I think that if you give him, if you're going to give him 10 to 12 touches a game in most games, and 5 to 6 of them are between the tackles, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think he can give you good work from that because he's a smart running back. He processes the field well. He can run gap or zone plays. He obviously has the quickness and speed to move, at least move the chains for you, if not be able to flip the field on occasion when everything's blocked up well. Lobby, I really like too. And I think Lobby's actually the best, maybe the second best runner of the three I'm going to talk about, Shipley, Lobby, and the third guy. Lobby is he has a real potential to become the true multi-purpose back. Kind of like I liken him to what Duke Johnson could have been if not the nagging injuries. He kind of gives you that skill between the tackles to run with some physicality when necessary. He positions himself well downfield on vertical routes and he plays it like a wide receiver. I mean, he can frame his position and make the catch. And he's great in the open field at setting up defenders in the screen game. So he could be a really nice complement at the very least. Kind of if everything comes together in a great way and he really shows durability between the tackles and can handle more, he might be a Brian Westbrook type, and that to me, that's a super high compliment. The third guy who I might like the most out of the three, even though I don't have him rated the highest, but I just enjoyed watching the most, was Blake Watson out of Memphis, the old Dominion transfer to Memphis. He isn't the best route runner of the three, but he's the best pass catcher of the three. His hand-eye coordination is magnificent, and he has good body adjustments. I think he is the best runner probably of the three too. He is more physical than meets the eye. Very good pad level, decent blocker, has, you know, the speed that Will Shipley has. He's in that range. He can pull away from you in the open field pretty quickly. And the guy he reminds me of a lot is a player that I think if he came along 8 years later, instead, he's like 8 years too early, and that was Gio Bernard. Gio Bernard, if he came along 8 years later, he would have been on par with Austin Eckler. But the league wasn't looking for guys like that and didn't have spread offenses. But Blake Watson to me is the sleeper of this running back class.
I want to ask you about one more guy in the running back class, and I'm only going to throw this out there because I think you're going to enjoy talking about the kid, uh, Kamani Vidal out of Troy.
Sure. I've joked that I've talked about DeAndre Swift, and I think a lot of people 2 years ago looked at Swift at Detroit and saw all the production, especially all the fantasy people out there. Looked at the production and said, he's a number one running back in this league. Like he's a star running back. And I think the real truth is that he's a good starter, but in the right system. And that right system is simulate space, toss plays, sweeps, screen plays, draws, anything where he doesn't have to set up blocks between the tackles because he's not very good at keeping plays inside when a box is tight and full, unless you are playing with a team like the Eagles where you have Jalen Hurts and he can occupy anywhere between 1 to 3 defenders with the zone read. And when you get that 1 to 3 offensive player to defensive player advantage in the box, you've got big space. And DeAndre Swift looked good in that. But when you didn't have that advantage, when Jared Goff doesn't have those wheels and they're running those plays, he can't create like an Ezekiel Elliott could in his heyday or a Saquon could do it. So when people saw DeAndre Swift the way they did, but inaccurately, they didn't know it, but they were looking at Kamani Vidal in the future because Kamani Vidal is about DeAndre Swift's dimensions, DeAndre Swift's speed, but better acceleration than Swift, better power than Swift, better contact balance than Swift, more maturity between the tackles than Swift, a better pass protector than Swift. He's just not a great route runner quite yet. He's more the guy he reminds me of isn't Swift. He reminds me of Ahmad Bradshaw. And I loved Ahmad Bradshaw coming out of school. I thought he was an excellent change of pace back. And Vidal also can block. Um, so if Vidal somehow turns into more than I expected, maybe we'll be talking about him on the hallowed ground of Maurice Jones-Drew of running backs in terms of how good Jones-Drew was at his peak. But I'm thinking more in the level of Ahmad Bradshaw. And to me, that's a compliment.
Absolutely. I am not sure that I'm used to watching defensive linemen go backwards when they get blocked by a running back, which I've seen a few times with Vidal.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. He gets that low center of gravity. He knows how to punch. He knows how to get that square squat stance and deliver the uppercut. And it's just a matter of diagnosing certain things that he's going to have to get better at. There's certain positional things that he can do to maybe leverage his blocking even more. But the want to and the baseline techniques that a lot of backs don't have at this level are already there for him. And he is one of the better blockers of the past of the running backs in this class.
All right, Matt, we have to finish up by talking about tight ends, and we're not going to talk about Brock Bowers. The Giants aren't going to go tight end at 6. Let's talk about again, like we did with running backs. We'll talk about day 2, day 3 options. Giants took a big swing a year ago with Darren Waller, and he was productive, but it didn't work out the way they hoped it would. The injuries, cropped up again, and I still think that was worth the swing for the Giants to take. It just, you take the upside swing and you turn you have a chance to get a guy with Darren Waller's talent level for pick number 100 in the draft. I think you take that swing. But with him considering retirement, my 2 cents on that is it's April and he's still considering retirement, which means he can't be all that committed to playing, going forward. I don't know. He may play, he may not, but I don't know how committed he is to the game anymore. So you might be looking at the Giants needing to supplement that room. Just give me a couple guys that you really like.
Ben Sano out of Kansas State's my number 2 tight end in this class. And he's more of a move tight end who can give you quality blocking in more of a lead blocker capacity, H-back type of capacity. He's 6'4", 250. He blew away people at the combine with his testing, but you can see that on the field. It shows up on the field as a route runner. He can run intermediate routes. He's a contested catch player who has the leaping ability and just the really solid hands. I mean, like very good techniques in terms of position in the catch point. And after the catch, he's like a heavy bag. Like if you've ever hit a heavy bag, like little kids, they look like they're going to hit a heavy bag and they think they're going to pound it. Then they hit it and they felt like they just broke their hand or their wrist if they try to do it. he looks like a heavy bag when he gets hit. Like he's like scrap iron inside, but like a heavy bag on the outside. And he just has great balance and good running skill. And while the blocking doesn't hold up as an inline guy, you're not going to put a 6'4", 250 guy in line very often. You're going to use him. If you are, you're having him go out on pass patterns. You're using him on tight end screens, or you're going to motion him and then have him as more of a lead blocker. And in those capacity, he's very good. So one of my favorite players in this class, like I look at Michael Mayer and all the buzz that Michael Mayer got for 3 years, and I go, I didn't hear about Ben Sano until like I started studying him. And I thought that was the guy deserving of the Michael Mayer buzz. Cade Stover, I'm a fan. I mean, tough former linebacker. The way he catches the ball technically, he doesn't look like he was a linebacker. He looks like, if anything, everybody likes to make the jokes that they play linebacker and defensive back because, well, that's why when they drop the ball, well, that's why they play defense. I would say the way he catches the ball, I would say that's why he's playing on offense, because it's spectacular how tight his hands are in situations that a lot of better, more touted prospects as receivers sometimes can't do. And he's a very nifty runner after the catch. And like Sano, he's more of a move tight end type of guy. If you want to wait a year, if you're like, all right, I'll take my chances. He's cleared the medicals. If you think he's cleared the medicals and the back injury isn't as big of a question mark and the ACL, they feel like it'll heal and they'll be fine. Later in the draft, Michigan, Iowa tight end Eric All, 6'4", 252, has speed to stretch the field, contested catch winner, decent blocker, captain at Michigan before he transferred. Very good football player, kind of in that if the athletic ability gets accessed to the level it can be and it's all the way back, he's somewhere between what Austin Hooper people hoped he could be and what Dalton Cade is about to become. If not, then yeah, he's more that Austin Hooper type, which is still solid blocker, solid receiver, can do some work down the middle of the field, and may get underused depending on who the receiving core is, or relied upon depending on who that core is. So those are guys that fit for me, kind of second day, third day, late in the draft.
Great. Hey, Matt, always appreciate the time. It's always insightful. We always learn a ton, and always absolutely look forward to doing this every year.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's a pleasure. And if you're a draftnik and a fantasy guy, the RSP is available at mattwaldman.com. You can find it there. You get a pre-draft and post-draft publication. It's 1,183 pages. The pre-draft. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. Everything's bookmarked, so you want to look at my process and how and the way that I format it, and hopefully an entertaining way you can. If you want to just look at the straight up rankings or the scouting reports, they're in great depth, and you can find them in that as well.
It is the war and peace of draft guides when it comes to to skill positions.
It really is.
But it is worth the time, worth the read, worth the money. So, Matt, always appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. I hope you've listened to both parts of our discussion with Matt Waldman, our quarterback discussion, and today's discussion about the wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. So, as I said, go back and listen to the quarterback one if you haven't done so already. And thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.